welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland preview show. Sunderland got back to winning ways against Norwich City last weekend, and we'll be looking to double up as we head to Wales to face a slowly improving Swansea City. And as always, we're here to preview the game this weekend, and to make his What the Falk hat-trick is Luke from the always excellent SwansCast. Luke, how are you doing, mate? Hat-trick, happy hat-trick day.
Oh, thank you. Take the match ball home with me, hopefully. But I'm doing great, thanks.
Good, nice to hear, mate. We'll get straight to it. Swansea, I think it's 5 wins in your last 7, unless my maths is terrible. Pretty solid reading. How's the mood down in South Wales?
It's definitely significantly better than if you asked me before that 7-game sample that you've just taken, because that includes our first win, which was against Sheffield Wednesday. It depends. I guess you could pick a sample for your agenda. 5 wins in 7, but 1 win in 3. So that win against Blackburn, which we got in the last match round, is important because the 2 losses previous, one was against Leicester, you kind of let that slide, but we lost at home to Watford afterwards, which some fans were disgruntled about the performance. It was like, okay, have we actually improved, or did we just get a couple of wins together? Where are we actually going? But winning away at Blackburn has suggested that we are on the right track. So onwards and upwards, hopefully. And Michael Duff has definitely turned what was a tricky start of the season around, I think, even though it's still early days.
It's such a weird league. I feel like between third, this is not correct maths, this is not true, but I feel like between 3rd and 20th, there's only about 2.5 points. So I feel like you can fly up and down and sort of thing. But before we go into the league position, because I honestly thought as I was writing these questions down, I thought you were still in the relegation zone, which tells you how tight the league is and how silly it is and how quickly it changes. But we'll go to your last game. You're touching that 1-0 win at Blackburn. We won at Blackburn this year, 3-1, but I actually thought Blackburn were a really good team. I wouldn't say bad as first half, but they're one of the better outfits we've come up against. But clean sheet, always a good win on the road. How was the performance?
Yeah, they had spells. It was a bit of a weird one. I think the first 10, 15 minutes was all Blackburn and probably should have been ahead. We weathered a bit of a storm right at the start of the match. But afterwards, we controlled the rest of the first half, which was a bit weird because it looked like it was going to be a tricky day, but then we took control. But we didn't score as much. So you could say both teams weren't as clinical as they should have been in their spells of dominance. We got 1 goal, but we had 2 disallowed for offside through Jamal Lowe. So in theory, we scored 3 by half time, just 2 of them didn't count. And then the second half, again, I think it started a bit more of a messy game, I would say. We had a few opportunities that we didn't take, but the longer the second half went on, as the home team, perhaps you'd expect, Blackburn did come back at us a bit, but ultimately couldn't find the finishing cutting edge to get a point out of it. So it was a good win away from home for us. Blackburn, definitely a good team. I think they're playing a lot different to what people might have expected of them from recent years. They're maybe more akin to what Swansea have been like recently in terms of the pass in football they're trying to play. Maybe they just haven't found the striker solution yet. They look more of a team goal, sort of the spread of the goals comes with the team, and maybe that's what cost them against us. But obviously we'll take away a good 1-0 away from home performance there, because I think they're not going to have a bad season.
No, I don't think so. They look like they're missing Burt and Diaz, but I thought it was a good win for us away from home. So, vice versa, I'm sure you'll feel exactly the same way. But
yeah,
there's a few talking points for Swansea. Now, I think the first one I'll come to is a man that, I'll be honest with you, I can say it now that he's gone. I don't really like him as a boss. Russell Martin left in the summer. Michael Duff comes in. But before we discuss the new man, which we'll get a little bit more in depth on with Michael Duff, because that's also really interesting, let's kind of look at the departure of Russell Martin. It's not the first time he's walked out on a job mid-project and sort of fell upwards somehow. It's a so-called bigger club, but I think that's mainly because they've came out of the Premier League recently. But how did the fans react to Russell Martin's departure, and how do you view him now that he's been gone?
I'd be interested to know your reasons for maybe disliking him, because as much as I might agree with you in some aspects, is why I'd ask. I don't dislike him. He did a good job as Swansea boss, and while he was here, I always backed him. But I think I can be quite transparent myself. I like to think I can look at what's going on. And I think he was quite clever in how he spoke in the media, the way that he made a connection with the fans. And when he left, I think it's made it quite hard for Michael Duff to take over from, because a lot of these things, he was very good at playing the victim in regards to ongoings with our board. Like, there's been issues with our board since before we got relegated from the Premier League that ultimately led to a relegation. And that's a long story. I'm not going to go into it. We've got American owners. It didn't really go the best since they took over, but also could have gone far worse. Okay. So, devil's advocate. But a lot of our fans are not happy with the amount of money that's been spent since we got relegated under this ownership. Russell Martin didn't get backed in January, which is kind of where him leaving really stems from, I believe. Obafemi left, didn't get replaced. They recalled Morgan Whittaker, who wasn't used correctly by, I will say, Russell Martin. That's on him. You can see what he's doing at Plymouth now, a missed opportunity. The board saw it as he's an asset doing well in a club. We've sent him on loan, so we'll recall him to solve the striker problem. They did try and sign, but didn't sign anyone. Probably should have done better, I would admit that. But Russell Martin didn't get what he wanted, threw his toys out of the pram a little bit, played the victim card very well. And we went on a really bad run at that time of year last season. And he's probably lucky he didn't get sacked, I'll be honest. It was something ridiculous, like 3 or 4 wins in 24 games in the Championship, which is an awful run of form. And ultimately he ended the season then with 7 wins in 9 and got himself a promotion, if you like, to Southampton. But because he talked about a project, the bigger picture, we're building something. You mentioned he left halfway through this project. I think a lot of fans were on board with that and gave him the benefit of the doubt when it wasn't going so well to last a bit longer, because he's doing things the right way. We're playing football the right way, the way we want to see it played. And he built that really strong relationship with the fans. So when he left, it was like, it's the board's fault. They should have backed him. We should have tied him down to a contract sooner and all this stuff. Yeah, you could say part of it, maybe that is true, but I don't think either party is necessarily innocent in the way that it ended. And I think he was quite well at using that to make himself look better. So that's what I think about it all. I'm glad for the good times that he had here, but ultimately I think he should have done a bit better last season specifically. If he didn't go on that really torrid run, and he admitted his head dropped after he didn't get back in January, and it took him about a month and a half to say to himself, look, sort it out, because the seasons are finished. We have got opportunity here, and we shot up the table in that last run of form. And you think 3 points off the playoffs, you only needed to win 1 more game in that 24-match period of really bad form, and your season could have been different. You could have been a Premier League manager now. Could have been. I'm not saying we should have or would have been, but that's on him. He had a wobble after not getting backed, and I think that's something he should have taken accountability for. Ultimately, it could have been better while he was here, and he is a young manager learning, but maybe the way he conducts himself sometimes is more for personal gain.
I think that's because we were obviously in League One when he was at MK Dons, and we did numerous shows with the guys at the MK Dons podcast, and then spoke to yourself last year. And I don't know what Russell Martin's Southampton came off, and obviously they're above us in the league at the moment, and they're not a bad side, but we battered them 5-0, and it was a lot of them just passing and passing and passing. And I remember speaking to you last year, and you were saying, like, sometimes you just make a stupid pass and concede a goal, like out of nothing.
Yeah.
But somehow, despite the fact that he's never really gone anywhere and done realistically anything, apart from occasional spells of good football, he keeps on falling upwards. Were you surprised that Southampton even approached him?
Not really, because I think a lot of clubs, especially after relegation, will have a bit of a change, or this style is not working. We want to play better. We want to do things the right way. I think Southampton had an influx of Man City higher-ups that maybe were interested in playing more like Man City, if you like, the passing of football, look after it. And he's a manager that is the way he likes to play. The possession stats of Southampton this year, of us last year, will tell you that is the priority. And people will say it's possession for the sake of it sometimes, and it can be. And I think that's the biggest change from Michael Duff, if we go into that later on. But that's what gets the heads turning. He will always say his shortcomings are due to the budget and backing that he's had. And I guess a club like Southampton would have been like, okay, well, we'll have that for you. And if you're saying you can do it with that, then here we go. So now I guess he's got that opportunity, but I would imagine they're expecting to go straight back up. And it did look a bit not so good early on in the season. but they are currently in the playoffs. However, significantly off the pace of Leicester, who came down with them, and Ipswich, who came up from League One. So, I mean, they're in a battle. Whether they stay there or not is another question. They've got the resources and the squad to definitely should be there. They should be finishing there. We nearly got there, and I would say the players that they've got available to him now are better. They just come down from the Premier League as a whole. So I don't really think he's got any excuses to fail this year. What I find quite interesting, because defence in his system is the biggest area of concern, and it was under us. Stupid goals, like you just mentioned, from nothing or getting caught in the transition. They're the two main ways we conceded. So our own fault, or just not being able to get back in shape quick enough with a counter-attack opportunity. But they're on -1 goal difference sitting in 4th place. That's got to be a concern for a longevity of a playoff push.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's not a Russell Martin podcast, but I've got my thoughts, I've got my feelings on him.
Yeah, that's fair.
But Michael Duff's an interesting one, because I don't know much about him, but he did well at where he was at previously. He got poached for a championship job for a reason. But I remember looking at, you see championship pages and you see things, and, he came in, it felt like he was under like immediate pressure, and it felt like because of the things he said in press conferences combined with results, and it took ages to get the first win. But now you've gone on that good run, looking at the forums and stuff, people seem like, maybe he's turned a corner and so on and so forth. Can you sort of run listeners through the short story of Michael Duff at Swansea City, why he was immediately under pressure, the things he said in press conferences, and why it seems the fans are standing behind him at the moment, if I'm reading that correctly?
Yeah. So I think it's to caveat all of what I'm going to say. I think people sometimes online who are the loudest quite often are people who are more negative as well, or can be. Like, a lot of people will be quick to voice their concerns more than they will voice their praise when it's going well. So when it was going bad, you saw it all, is what I'm trying to say. So it was important as well, what I just said about Russell Martin's relationship with the fans. Very good. He's very good at making that, at orchestrating that relationship, saying the right things in the press, in the media. He would call the owners out when he thought it was necessary. And because there's a bit of tension between the fans and the ownership, the fans get on board with that, yeah? So he's gone. People blame the board for maybe the situation that meant he went. It was a long, drawn-out saga for him going. I think it took over a month from when it was linked to when it was confirmed. We got Duff in quite quick after Martin was announced to go in. I would imagine we were looking in the background knowing what was coming. There was a lot of legal disputes with Southampton around the transfer. I think there was a dispute about, we had a clause in his contract that if he went to a Premier League club, we get certain compensation. They approached him while he was still in the Premier League, so we were expecting that. They're trying to say, well, we got relegated, so we want to not pay that. That's what the dispute was. As far as we're still ongoing. So that wasn't the best start to Michael Duff coming in with all that drama. But he did come in. I spoke to a Barnsley fan, was told a lot of things about how he does there, what sort of football they play, how the season kind of progressed. Quite exciting, really. It sounded like maybe he would continue on from Russell Martin, shore up the defence and add a bit more directness to Swansea, a bit more threat on the counter. And we said passing for passing's sake previously, a little bit less of that, but still playing the Swansea way, if you like, where they will pass it, but they will be more threatening when the opportunity arises. So, that sounded good. Get off to the season started, and a couple of decent results. I think we had a draw against Birmingham at home. I think we drew against Coventry. We lost to West Brom 3-2 after going 3-0 down, so a bit of a comeback. So the signs were there. And all of a sudden, it was 2 games that really, really made things quite sour. And that was Bristol City at home, where I believe we lost 3-1, and Cardiff City, our big rivals, as I'm sure people are aware, away, where we lost 2-0. And the comments in the media around this time as well really stirred the pot up. So Bristol City game, they kind of our second rivals, the Cardiff. Okay, so they were back-to-back games, not an easy fixture list to deal with so early in the season. The performance was really, really poor. There wasn't really a game plan. You couldn't see anything we were building as a team. You couldn't see what he was trying to do, the bigger picture. We just didn't look like we knew what we were doing. At the time, we were playing a 5 at the back formation, and the players looked a bit lost, really. There wasn't any not passion, but drive or energy or any of that sort of stuff. Really bad performance. They could have battered us 5-6 goals, to be fair, but we lost 3-1. After that, he kind of played the Cardiff game down, being the next game in the media. Now, that is like a big no-no around here. You know, it's the biggest match. A little bit of history around the match. No club had ever done the double on the other until recently. So I guess another string to Russell Martin's bow. He was the first manager to ever do the double in that fixture in its history over 100 years or whatever it is. First one to ever do a massive deal. That was a massive deal. And he didn't just do it the first time, he did it the season after as well. So back-to-back doubles when it had never been done once. Massive achievement. 4 games in a row, we've beaten them. They haven't really laid the glove on us, if you like. You know, it's been quite comfortable for us. So we go into this game, Michael Duff's playing it down, really didn't sit well with the fans. In the past, it's always been the Cardiff manager doing that, and they've always never really got off very well. So we were a bit worried going into it. Had a really bad performance, looked very lackluster. I don't think we had a shot on target until like right at the end, where we had maybe 1 or 2. Worst derby performance I think most fans will say they've ever seen. Really wasn't a good time for Michael Duff at that moment, and we were sitting in relegation as well. So that's the media comments, coupled with the fact it was a derby and a poor performance. Couldn't see the direction, didn't know what the game plan was. All the stuff we promised from the Barnsley fans, didn't see any of it on the pitch. Now going into the next match, he did change the formation to a 4 at the back system against QPR, and we got a draw. They scored a late goal, which cost us getting our first win. So it didn't quite turn the tide with the fan negativity. But then we went on our 4-match winning run, starting with a 3-0 victory against Sheffield Wednesday. Now, the longer that went on, the better it got, essentially, because at first it was, well, it's only Sheffield Wednesday. They're not doing very well. You should beat them. I think then I can't remember, we beat second, but we then beat Norwich and we beat Plymouth away. So the teams progressively got more tricky as we got the results. So yeah, it's definitely turned around. He's turned a corner. I think he has been a bit naive in the press sometimes. He said a couple of other things as well, like after the formation change, you say, the formation doesn't matter. It's just what I want him to do on the pitch. It doesn't matter about the formation. You know, playing things down, you're like, you probably don't need to be saying this sort of stuff. But I think the press are trying to trick him into things, knowing the reactions they're getting on social media. He's definitely getting better with it. There has been comparisons with Russell Martin, which haven't helped him. And I think he's tried to escape that with some of the comments as well. So one of the things he said was, you're not going to catch me fist pump in the air like we just won the World Cup after we win a game, you know? And that's what Russell Martin used to do after a win and rile the fans up. So I understand where he's coming from, and I have a bit of sympathy because everyone loved Russell Martin for the way he's playing. Like I said, he developed that relationship, and I think he was quite clever at putting himself out there in a certain way in the media. And I think that links to what you were saying about why maybe not quite sure about him as a manager. And I think that's really made it difficult for Michael Duff, but he is coming out of that, I think, coming around the corner. And I do look forward to what else he can bring for the rest of the season. I know it was a bit long-winded, but a lot's happened in, 2-3 months since season started.
Yeah, it seemed like that, and that's why I thought it was far from long-winded. It was perfect, because it just seems from the outside looking in, I'm like, well, is this guy liked? Did this guy hate? Do they hate Russell Martin that he left? And that's kind of sort of summed up, and that gets us to the players. There was also a fairly big turnover with players in and out. You know, Joe Pirro went for big money to Leeds. Stephen Banda, Nicham, they kind of went. There's more than that as well. Ryan Manning obviously joined Russell Martin at Southampton, but you brought in Jerry Yates, Janelli, Charlie Patino, Josh Tiemann, or Tiemann, however you pronounce it.
Yeah.
Who's been the standout signing so far, and who are you missing the most?
So I think Perot is the obvious one to say who we're missing, but Manning equally has been a miss. And that's because we played a 5 at the back quite often last season, and a lot of our creativity came from the wing-back areas. I say wing-back areas. We didn't really have any right-backs, so most of it came from the left, and Manning was that source. So I want to say he had the most assists for us, 9 or 10 assists last season, and probably one of the most for the championship as well, especially from a defender, or classed as a defender. And it's no surprise to see he's followed Russell Martin to Southampton. Russell Martin actually announced in like February or something that Manning wasn't going to sign a new contract. So question marks how planned out that might have been, but we will never know. However, that was a big hole to fill. And you said Timon signed there. He's at the moment, he's the one that's kind of starting to get some game time and some form under his belt. Also, Joe Perreault up front, so he's the main source of goals. 2 back-to-back 20-goal season. That's really hard to find in the Championship unless you pay in. And I guess that's what Leeds had to pay for that. I would have liked a little bit more. I would have thought that, the stats, the goals there, and I think he's showing at Leeds as well that he can score in a bigger team as well. But he only had 1 year left on his deal, so it was a catch-22 in terms of do we risk holding on and getting less? The only way we were ever going to have a chance of keeping him was promotion, and that's a massive risk with the transition of a new manager and style and all the rest of it that's come this season. So yeah, he's gone. Jerry Yates has come in. I think he's got 4 goals so far this season. He's been a bit hit and miss with the crowd, and I think that's mainly because he's a different player to Perreault, and it's really harsh to compare them. Perreault was clinical, really good with his left foot. He can kind of score from anywhere. And he's good at kind of pulling defenders away. You don't notice it unless he's not on the pitch, but he will open up the spaces for other players because they're so focused on trying to stop Perreault, knowing what he can do, two 20-goal seasons. Yates doesn't necessarily do that, but he's hard-working. He won't stop running. He'll hassle a defence. And that suits Michael Duff's more pressing approach to our defence as well, pressing from the front. And he's the sort of striker that will pop up and score the goals by being in the right place at the right time. When a ball comes into the box, he pops up the back post and taps it in, that sort of thing. Or a little like someone's dinked it back over after a cross, crosses it back in, and he's just there to finish it off. It's not like a hell of a strike. It's literally like it hit any part of his body and go in. But that's how he seems to be picking up a few of his goals. People just want to see a bit more, I think, shooting from other areas, but they're used to seeing it with Perreault. So maybe he's just got some hard boots to fill. I'm sure in time we'll appreciate what he offers as a difference. I also think he works a bit better playing off another striker, but right now he is playing as a central lone man with 2 wingers. So maybe a little bit of an adjustment for him. Patino has also been impressive coming on loan from Arsenal. I think he's on 4 assists for the season already. He's only 19, I believe. So he's got a big future ahead of him, I'm sure. Both of those 2 players I mentioned played in the Championship at Blackpool last year. So they've got experience at this level. Patino's biggest weakness is his fitness. He can't really do 90 minutes and he can't do 2 matches a week, full matches. But he's definitely instrumental when he's on the pitch, and we miss him when he's not there. But the unsung one, which you didn't mention, is Josh Key. I'm unsure if he's going to feature in this game because he's been injured for the last few matches. But on right back, he's coming at, and he's come from Exeter in League One, and he's been a very good sign-in for the fee that we paid. I think it was basically compensation at the end of contract. And I would be shocked if he doesn't progress up the league or into the Premier League in the future. He's not quite there yet. And I think when we played Leicester, that shows that. But he's definitely a bit of raw talent who, the more he plays in the Championship, is going to just keep getting better. Quite exciting player to have, really.
We were linked to Josh Key ourselves, actually. I feel like it was about a season ago or last January maybe. So yeah, that's disappointing to hear that he's doing quite well from our perspective. But I asked you this last year, and I know I asked you this question, but I feel like I ask a lot of fan bases the same question. But I think it's kind of the amount of like clubs that are former Premier League clubs or big clubs or new clubs in the league, and how tight the league is, and how many teams end up just sitting in a position that's effectively nowhere. But I've looked through, since you came down, I think you came down 2018. You finished 10th, 6th, 4th, 15th, 10th, 15th, and there's been 4 managers in those 6 seasons. Not all of them have been sacked. We've just discussed before, some of them have left for their own reasons, and there was Graham Potter in there as well. But where are Swansea as a club at the minute? Because I suppose when you look at those league positions and the managers you've had, whether it's been sacked or they've left and gone elsewhere, I suppose it can feel a bit of a melee because it's been mid-table for a number of seasons.
I think the theme is, I mentioned the owners and the backing, and they all come in, they all say the things at the start, and this is for all 3 that have left so far. So Graham Potter, Steve Cooper, Michael Duff. I know the budget year is not there. I know I got to work with a tight budget. I know I got to develop youth, and that's what I'm willing to do. and then they get 2 years in or a year in for Graham Potter, and they haven't been backed, and now it's a problem. They've taken all from the youth, I guess, what they can. They just missed out or done as well as they think, and I think they know they can move on to a better opportunity at that stage because they've done quite well. Not quite so well that we got promoted or anything, but I guess it's a tough job, and doing well here seems to put managers in a good light. Stepping stone, I understand, like I'm not arguing the case, but it's just funny to hear how they all come in and say they know the criteria and they're well happy to, do their job within that. But by the end, it's like, oh, well, I haven't had enough backing, and if I had this striker, we would have been able to finish the job. But as you mentioned, the positions, Potter just missed out on the first year after we come down. He had to do a big reshuffle after, the Premier League players all left on the big wages. Steve Cooper, back-to-back seasons in the playoffs. Got to say that's the most successful period. So as much as Russell Martin has been applauded for the way that he played down here, he did back-to-back out of the playoffs, following on directly from that. So that's what I would argue should have done a bit better, potentially. And I'd also argue he was more backed than what he claims that he is, which we've talked about in detail on our podcast. So Michael Duff coming in now. Look, we don't know how it's going to end. It doesn't seem like very often you get a manager for longer than 2 seasons these days. We are in a bit of no man's land, I think, in that mid-table championship realm now that a lot of teams probably seem to fall into. I think I saw a statistic not so long ago that we are actually one of the teams in the league that has been here the longest based on promotions and relegations that have happened since we've come down. There's a few ahead of us, of course, but a lot of change. And I would argue that's where we are now. We're not parachute payments anymore. A lot of our big talent has moved on. We are relying on our youth system to produce new talent or to find a bargain from somewhere to develop and sell on for more. That's how the club keeps itself afloat. And I guess you've got to have that good season where everything clicks into place for you to look up. I think if Duff is here for a prolonged period, there's no reason why he can't build into a position of challenging to progress up the league again. But some of our fans, I think, I don't know, maybe it's when you started supporting a club. We were in the Premier League for 7 years. So I guess if you've only known that period of success, when you're sitting in 13th or earlier in the season when you were down in 20th, 21st, that's not good enough for Swansea, because we've always been up there. We were in the Prem for all this time and we're falling backwards. We're slipping down the table. But ultimately, if you stretch 10 years previous to the Premier League, then we were in League Two. So are we really in a false position? I just think it's quite competitive these days, as you mentioned at the start. A lot of clubs, I would argue, would say the same thing. You probably could say the same yourselves. You belong in the Premier League. You were there for a prolonged period. I'm sure a lot of other fan bases are saying the same thing. So no one's entitled to be there. You've got to earn it. And I think fans don't really like to think that way, but that's ultimately what football is. And that's why you like to, it's a sport, isn't it? And you've got to build on that success. And it's a challenge for the 24 teams in the league. And only 3 of them are going to be successful really by the end.
Yeah, I feel like I could probably pinpoint about 15 fans that I'll speak to during the season preview show, and about 15 of them would probably want to say, or there or thereabouts, yeah, we can go for the playoffs because we should be in the Premier League. Like that's how competitive the Championship is, and there's only 3 that can go up. But
how many of them clubs are going to say we should be in the Premier League? You can't all be one of them 3 teams. So. But does that mean you should sack your manager because you were one of the ones that missed out? Because that's what it feels like, Someone called us out on our podcast the other day because we had 4 wins in 11 games and half the league had 4 wins in 11 games. So I just questioned, so does that mean half the league should sack their manager because we've all had 4 wins in 11 games? And that's not good enough, apparently. So sorry to interrupt.
No, you're right. It's so cut and thrust. Southampton, Middlesbrough both had horrendous runs of form. Stoke, I spoke to a Stoke fan a few weeks ago. Alex Neil on the verge of getting sacked. They're now on 3 wins and 3 against Leeds, Sunderland and Middlesbrough. And I just think it's a really competitive league. And I think Leicester and Ipswich look like they're flying away with it. The playoffs is anyone's up down to about 19th, I think. But hopefully one of them is Sunderland. But looking at Swansea, we're one of those teams that actually did a double on us last year. 2 really frustrating games. One, we went down to 10 men with Luca 9. It was a red card in hindsight. and then the 2-1 defeat at Swansea. But we did make the playoffs in the end. It was a good season for us. We've done all right this season as well. Back to winning ways on Saturday. From the outside looking in, what have you made of Sunderland over the last sort of season and a half?
So I know it was a really successful year last year. I wasn't sure how that was going to translate into this year. And I know you mentioned, I wasn't sure if some of the Russell Martin hate was going to come from their attempt to steal off your forward players, which they were trying to do by the end of the transfer window, weren't they, Southampton? And I did find it quite funny then when you went and battered them. But yeah, no, I'm not surprised to see you doing well. I think the history is there that you are perhaps a bigger club than, especially when you were in League One. And I know you've had all the documentary and been heavily publicised, the downfall, by as accidental as it probably was, and it probably ended up making good television. I think it was only a matter of time before that came back. So you've got some exciting players for me. Patrick Roberts, obviously still there, stands out. I know you signed Bradley Dack. I'd be interested to know what his injury situation is like. Are you actually managing to see a lot of him? But ultimately, I do feel like Sunderland is a team that I'm not looking forward to playing. I wouldn't say it's a comfortable game for any team. And yeah, I know you've maybe had a little bit of a poor run the last couple of games, but you were in the playoffs or there or thereabouts when you for the early part of the season. I'd expect you to be challenging up there again. Like we beat you twice last year, and you essentially finished ahead of us, so I guess it says all about the league what you just mentioned being competitive. Yeah. It's tricky to sort of pinpoint who is where. I think basically the same thing as what you said, I've said in our podcast last week, actually, that from probably about third, or if you want to say, if Leeds and Southampton do pull away, 5th down to 21st, it seems anyone could beat anyone on a given week. It only takes a small run of form to shoot up the table or back down if it's the opposite. And we're all probably the same level. And it's just how it goes on the day and who's got the momentum and who's in good form is what is going to decide it. That's what it seems to me, very competitive. But I think Sunderland will definitely be one of the ones that are peaking above slightly.
I hope so. I looked through, I've never asked this question and I decided just to do it. So we've got 2 questions left. One's, of course, predictions, but Ki Sung-young, Fabio Borini, Andy Melville, Danny Graham, and Colin Pascoe all played for Sunderland and Swansea. Most of them successfully, one of them not successfully at all. You can probably tell which one by the manner of the way I said his name. But who's your favourite ex-Swansea and Sunderland player and why?
So it was Borini was on the list, wasn't he?
Borini, Key, yeah.
Yeah. They've all, I would say Borini, Key and Danny Graham, all quite instrumental at different periods in our successful period. It's probably between Borini and Graham for 2 different reasons. Borini he came on loan from Chelsea before he was kind of anyone, I guess. When we got promoted, the season we got promoted, he came in January. That season, we really struggling to find a striker, and he came in loan and kind of made that position his own. There was a free kick that he scored against Norwich in the style of Didier Drogba, who obviously was at Chelsea at the time. I think he learned the technique off, and I think they went up the same year as us in one of the automatic positions, and we had a really convincing 3-0 win over them. And it was just such a good feeling around the club at the time, and he was such a big part of that. Obviously played in the playoffs and the playoff final, and one of them lone players that when he went, he was a bit gutted and you wish he could have stayed a bit longer. Ultimately, he wrote a letter to the club thanking for the support and all that stuff. So I want to come back, blah, blah, blah. Never happened. And I think he scored against us in the half since as well, and perhaps forgot about the letter when he did so. But yeah, really good and important part of that promotion season under Brendan Rodgers. And that's probably one of my favourite seasons, ultimately, because it is, we've only been to the Premier League since it's been the one time in terms of winning promotion. Stayed there for a while. But it was such a massive deal for the club when it happened. I think everyone in our team is always going to be remembered so fondly. And obviously he was part of that. Danny Graham then, for similar reasons, was the striker that we signed then the year we went up. I think he was one of the top goal scorers in the league of our promotion year. So we decided to go and get him. And he was instrumental in keeping us up. And we didn't just stay up, we stayed up quite comfortably. against all odds because we were heavily backed to go down, like written off. Always do better as the underdogs. We did back in the day, the Swansea way, we've risen up the leagues the right way. All of that was always talked about at the time, which is what the fans can't let go of. Another story, but I think that's partly why we're stuck where we are. But yeah, Danny Graham, very instrumental in that success as well under Brendan Rodgers. He only really had a season and a half with us. Michael Laudrup came in the next year and Michu was the story. So he struggled to, he slowly got phased out of the team before leaving. But he can't be forgotten for what he did in that first year as well to keep us in the league. I don't know what he would consider his best season, but he scored quite a few goals that year. I don't think he was the most prolific when he was in the Premier League, especially when he was at other teams. And I like to think when he was with us, he did have a good time of it and he was relatively clinical. It would be interesting to hear what you would think of it. I mean, if that ever happens, but yeah, definitely an important player for us at that time. So those two players definitely stand out.
Rubbish for us, Danny Graham. We paid $5 million for him and I wish we could have kept the receipt.
Did you get him from us? I want to say maybe you did.
£5 million.
Did he not score against us though? I feel like
no,
he definitely did when he was at Hull.
He never scored for us. He scored one goal off his backside. He's not well remembered. And Fabio Borini's loan spell is remembered very, very well. We hawked for him back. We did get him back. Didn't really work out. So I'll go with Key because he was nice.
I mean, Key won a League Cup with us, so he had success too.
Cultured, I think is the word. Final question. Now, I'm not too sure how I'm going to go with this one. I think I would take a draw, so I'm going to go with 1-1. I'm confident of it, but I don't really know what to expect of Swansea because you're not Russell Martin Swansea. But where are you going prediction-wise?
I would like to ask before I answer my prediction. Do you think your game plan would be likely to be more defensive or more attacking?
No, we don't know how to defend. We'll just go for it. We're just a young team that goes attacking. Like, not that we're bad defensively, but that's just the way we play. Okay,
we struggle to break defensive teams down, so I'm a little bit. I guess depends how clinical you are, but maybe I'm going to go for a 2-1 Swansea win. We're at home. If we were at home and you said you were coming down to shut up shop, I'd be more worried. Based Watford game, for example, but we gave Leicester a good game. You can't go toe-to-toe with Leicester. No one can in this league. No. But at least for 60 minutes, it looked like we could have done something. And yeah, I think there'll be space. We like a bit of a high press. So if you are attacking and there's gaps and we're pressing and we can win it in dangerous areas, it kind of scoring goals that we used to concede all the time under Russell Martin from doing this high press. So hopefully we can get that back on track. I know there's no midweek game this week, so that should help us with some of the concerns we had at home to Watford. So yeah, I think it's important for Michael Duff to get a home win. So I think he needs to aim to win this game. So I'm going to go 2-1 Swansea.
Luke, thanks very much, mate.
Thank you for having me again.